Well, it's a tremendous privilege to be here this evening, and actually, I brought a video with me that's been redone that shows a little bit of the horrors of genocide and but what's going on today in Rwanda. And I don't know what happened to it. When I started watching this video, I leaned over to Anthony and I said, I hadn't even seen that video myself. So we're at a place of decision right now. Do we blame the devil that the right videos are not up there? Do we spiritualize it and say, well, maybe God didn't want us to see it? But I'm just of the opinion that stuff happens in life, and it's neither God nor the devil, although it can be. A number of years ago, I've got a good friend that he and I hunt and do some fishing together, and he's very competitive. He lives about 3 hours from me, so he comes down during certain times of the year to hunt, and we were going to go out dove hunting. And competitive as he is, he wanted to see who got the most birds. The limit was 10, and for the day, and so we go out into the desert and camp by a little water hole and wait for the dove to come in. And at the end of the day, I had 8, he had 9, and we were walking back to the truck, and he said, I'm telling you, I just wanted to get my limit today, and I hate that I didn't. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a dove coming. And we were kind of walking away. And I said, Ron, to your left. And all of a sudden he saw the dove, he threw it up and got him. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for bringing that bird to me. And I said, wait a minute. God had nothing to do with that. Because, Ron likes to spiritualize everything. And I said, God had nothing to do with that. If you want to bless somebody and thank somebody, thank me. If I would have seen that bird, you would have never seen it, and you'd have never got your limit. And I've kind of come to the conclusion, after being in ministry for almost 50 years now, that listen to what I'm saying, okay, and don't want to offend anybody. Well, I do. I mean, I'm getting back at Anthony. He comes into our church, and it takes me a whole year to clean stuff up. And I've had a few people say, why do you invite him back? And I say, you know what, because he's my friend. And we need to be challenged in our lives. And the thing that'll keep people in bondage and darkness is contempt prior to investigation. So I think we need to sit back and kind of have a look at some things. And but anyway, back to my exciting story about hunting. I'm of the opinion that the poor devil gets blamed for a lot of stuff that he's not responsible for. And I think sometimes God gets credit for things that he didn't do either. It's just life. Life happens. And I've had to change some of my thinking over the years about God and who he is and what he's all about and how I'm to relate to him. And still trying to figure out why some things happen and some things don't happen, and why God blesses some people and not blesses others, and why God heals some people and doesn't heal others. And I still haven't got that all figured out, even after 50 years of ministry. But it certainly hasn't diminished my belief in God or my faith in Him, because I'm coming more and more to the conclusion that we've got a good dad, and He loves us. And I got in last Wednesday, and Anthony was telling me that on Wednesday nights they have the movie, I guess every other week or once a month or something like that. And I don't watch a lot of movies. I like a lot of good westerns, but the movie was the Adjustment Bureau. And I guess this coming Wednesday, that's going to be discussed. And it's an intriguing movie, and I'm not going to go into it a little bit, but I just want to speak a word just briefly to you, what I got out of that, and not the whole movie, just right there at the very front. Because it's about a young man that was a senator in New York, and probably a Democrat, but from New York. But anyway, he was a bright star. He was young. He was energetic. The people loved him. And when it came time for his reelection, he was leading in the polls tremendously. And but then somebody drug some stuff up about his past. And as it turned out, he lost the election. Now, that's all I'm going to tell you about the movie. I mean, there's so much. A person could take that and preach forever on the events that came out of that movie. But I've realized that the best indicator in a person's life for the present and the future can be the past, if you let the past creep into your present and your future. And it's good for us to look over our shoulders every now and then, but don't camp there. And part of the purpose of this conference in Rwanda is, when I was there last year, I had a meeting with the CEO of governance of the country. And I knew that they were already preparing for 2014 and the 20th anniversary of the genocide, where 1 million people lost their lives in 100 days. And by the way, that's still going on in Congo right now. I saw a documentary the other night late on television. I couldn't sleep because of the time difference and everything like that, and what's going on in Congo. And they're still raping and murdering, raping little children. They interviewed a doctor there in Goma, which I've been right next to there, and the horrific things that people do to people. You know, we think we're civilized, but I'm afraid that if things are not dealt with that are in our hearts, they're going to surface at some point or other. And I guess God could stop that, and many people in Rwanda that I've met with over the years have asked the question, why did God allow that? And you know, I can't answer the question about a lot of the whys, but I have come to one conclusion, and I would dare say that Anthony has talked to you about this, but I've come to realize that I don't believe God's in control. I believe He can be, because He's sovereign. But being sovereign, to me, and I'm not a real smart person, but at least it fits into my theology, sovereign to me does not mean that He does everything for everybody's, in our estimations, best interest. So I've kind of concluded that even though God can be in control, I believe He's in charge. And if you only believe that God's in control, you're always going to be asking, God, why does this happen? Why does that happen? But if you believe that God's in charge rather than being in control, you're going to be asking what? What is God trying to say in this? And so back to visiting with Professor Shaka, a brilliant man, can speak 32 languages. We were talking about the past a little bit, and I said, you know, Professor Shaka, one of the things that troubled me on one of my trips to Rwanda was I came during the week of remembrance. They do 7 days of mourning and grieving over the genocide. And then they spend 93 days in remembrance. But during that 7 days, work stops at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. People get together. There's no joyous worshiping, praising, dancing, music. And that's what I wanted to be on the video that I brought with you. Not only just a little bit of the genocide, but what has transpired. And I said, Professor Shaka, what I would like to see at some point is not you focus on what was, but what you're becoming. And I just off the top of my head, I said, why don't we, the next conference we have here in Rwanda, why don't we call it Rwanda Reborn Coming of Age? They have a vision statement called 2020, and they're already 5 years ahead of that. The death rate among infants is down 65% in the last 20 years. The life expectancy has doubled in that country. AIDS is down 85%. Every time I go, I just see growth everywhere. And the man that you just saw on the screen there, who was the Minister of Education, he's not the Minister of Education there now. There's another gentleman. And we met with him, and he's very interested in what we're bringing to that country. Now, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, so my main reason for being here is just to thank you for investing in the kingdom in Rwanda. And we have learned to love Anthony and his family, and I'm always excited when it comes to our conference every year. I don't know what's going to be, and I'm not joking when I say sometimes it causes me trouble, because he and the other men that come into our house, they have the freedom to share whatever is on their heart. I try to have a theme for the conference every year, and that doesn't mean diddly squat, because they're going to preach wherever they want to anyway. Although this year, I'm on public notice right here in England. I'm going to ask them to stick pretty close. I'm getting too old. I'm 69, and I'm getting too old to fight some of the battles that I fight over some of the goofy things that these guys say periodically. But, you investigate them, you look into them. And I've learned a great deal about England, actually, from Anthony, because he comes with these little nuggets of things that, we as Americans really don't know. One of the things that I just learned, and it wasn't Anthony that shared this with me, but, the Americans called the Brits redcoats during the early days of our country. And I didn't know why they were called redcoats, other than they wore red coats. But the real reason for that is when a British soldier was shot, the blood was not seen because the coats were red. That also explains why the French wear brown pants. But I apologize for any French who are here, but you can't help where you're born. But Chris already was talking about a Christmas. And I've got to tell you a real quick story that it's so true to nature and people. We're getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving. And there in America, I'm going to be celebrating it up at a big elk camp. My wife and I and some friends are going to be going up into the mountains. We're going to be hunting elk on Thanksgiving. And I know Jesus isn't coming before December the 6th. I can promise you he is not coming before December the 6th. Because I've already consulted with God and said, don't send him, man. I'm on this elk hunt, and I want to make the elk hunt. So don't send Jesus back before then. And he'll probably not sent him back by then. But anyway, at Christmas time, my little boy wanted a bicycle for Christmas, and he was raised in a Christian home, and he kept telling his mom he wanted to write a letter to Santa Claus, and she tried to explain to him, that even though we celebrate Christmas and think about Santa Claus and, going to bed early and leaving out a little tray of biscuits, cookies, whatever you call them here, and a little thing of milk and everything like that. And his mom said, what you really need to do is you need to write a letter to Jesus, because that's what Christmas is all about, the celebration of the birth of Christ. And so he gets out a little pencil and paper, and he starts writing, Dear Jesus, I have been good all year long, and I want a bicycle for Christmas. And he looked at that and said, well, that's really not true. So he wads it up, throws the paper away, and he starts writing again. Dear Jesus, I have been good most of the year, and I'd like to have a bicycle for Christmas, and I try to be good to my sister. He said, that's not true. So he wads that up, throws it away, and he starts writing again. Dear Jesus, I am good some of the time. And he thought, that's not going to work either. So he threw the paper down, ran downstairs, looked under the Christmas tree, and there was a nativity scene. And he looked underneath there, and he grabbed Mary, the mother of Jesus, the little figurine, grabbed it, ran upstairs, opened his drawer to his socks, put the little figurine of Jesus in the sock, wadded it up, and put it at the very back of his sock drawer, and sat down. Dear Jesus, if you ever want to see your mother again, and quite frankly, we do that as adults too, don't we? We try to bargain with God, and God, I'll do this if you'll do that, and I don't know really exactly how all that works, but I just know that the God I serve loves me, and I don't understand, and I cannot explain to some people why certain things happen, such as Rwanda and the genocide there. But they do. But we don't want to camp there. And I'm afraid that many people's destiny gets put on hold because they spend most of their life looking over their shoulder with regrets. And yet sometimes it's those very things that will catapult us into our real destiny in life. And I don't even, I've come to conclude also that generally it's not the devil that drags up our past, even though the Bible says he's an accuser of the brethren. It's generally not the devil that does it, it's people. It's our friends sometimes, our former friends, which have now become our enemies. Or people that would prefer to see us fail because in our failure that seems to make them feel a little bit better about their failure. And it's just really sad that that's the case. I want to give you just a little bit of history real quick as to why I ended up going to Rwanda. In 2007, I was asked by a dear friend of mine, Harold Eberly, who has Bible college in Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, to go and bring the commencement address at the colleges there. Where am I here? And I'd been going into Peru for about 10 years, and that work and that ministry was kind of coming to an end for me. And so Harold said, I would really like for you to go. And so I agreed to go, and I was a little hesitant about going because I was not looking forward to having all the vaccinations that you have to go into a third world country. But I went ahead and went down there 2007, and the first place that I was to speak was in Kigali, Rwanda. We landed in Nairobi and spent the night there, and then flew into Kigali, Rwanda. And as the plane was landing in Kigali, I heard an absolute clear word from God, not for me, but for the nation of the people. And here's all that I heard God say: that Rwanda was going to be the emerging nation in Africa to demonstrate forgiveness and reconciliation and growth and prosperity. And it was going to be an example to the other nations around Africa. Because not only did Rwanda experience in part genocide, but Burundi, Kenya, Tanzania, Congo, Uganda. And I spoke then went on to speak at these different colleges in Rwanda and Uganda and Kenya, and had no plans whatsoever to go back. There was really in my heart, I was raised in a part of the country in America where black people were second-hand citizens, second-class citizens, and as a child, part of my life was raised in a little town, and the black people had their school and had their church, and they couldn't come into the restaurants, and I was raised with that. I didn't have a real attitude about that, but that was the way I was raised, and I really, there was nothing in me to want to go back to Rwanda. Matter of fact, the trip almost killed me. I mean, it was 3 countries in 10 days, and we always started late. And I'm glad to hear Anthony lean over to me and say, you know what, it's kind of frustrating when people show up late. Well, I haven't got completely past that, but having been to Africa now for 13 trips, I've got pretty much past that, because sometimes it's not a few minutes late. Sometimes it's not an hour or two late. Sometimes we start 4 hours late. But anyway, had no intention of really going back. But a young man that I had met in Kigali, and there was something that connected with us. Now, I want to say something that you may or you may not agree with, but people are always talking about divine appointments, and I know we have them, but I think they're really rare. I think that most of the time we have chance encounters that can be divine appointments, if you see the potential that God may have in that. And he invited me to come back and do a conference with about 350 pastors there in Kigali. And because I'm 165 miles from Phoenix, Arizona, where I fly out of, I generally go over the day before, spend the night, and then fly out the next morning, because it's about 30 to 35-hour flight, and, transferring planes and everything like that. And so I went over and had some things in my heart to share. And when I walked out of the hotel room, there was the Wall Street Journal newspaper. And I picked it up, and on the front page was a picture of then President George Bush and Rick Warren, who pastors the largest Southern Baptist church in the world there in California, Saddleback Church. And as I looked at that paper and I read that they were in Rwanda, and all of a sudden the thought crossed my mind, what in the heck am I doing going to Rwanda? I have no money, as the church has in California, Saddleback Church. I have no political contact or power or influence, as our then wonderful President Bush. I say that purposefully to get a cheer out of some of you, probably disdained by others. But and I thought to myself, what? there's no reason for me to go whatsoever. The church I pastor is small. We probably average a couple of 220 people. The town I live in is 10,000 people and predominantly Mormon. And I never get invited to conferences or anything like that. I mean, I'm not a great speaker. And I started beating myself up. Why go? You have nothing to offer. As I got to the elevator, God spoke to me. And he said, I'm sending you there to give them your heart. Because that's what they need. And on that trip, I met with the chief advisor to the president of the country. I was scheduled to meet with him. We were in his office. He got called away for an emergency meeting. And Dr. Shudi Manasseh, professor, wanted to know my reason for coming. And I told him that story. Number one, of how God had spoken to me about Rwanda and how that was going to be an example to the other African nations. And I told him about reading the newspaper and President Bush being there and Rick Warren being there. And I said, really, Professor, the only thing I have to offer this country is my heart. And he started crying. He said, more than anything else, that's what our country needs. And so I've gone 13 times now. And it was through y'all's generosity that helped me make this last trip. And anything that was accomplished there, in part, is going to be credited to y'all's account in heaven. We had, Patrick invited 400 church leaders and dignitaries, heads of denominations, political leaders. The first day, we had over 500 people show up. The second day, we had almost 600 there, and the last day, we had between 650 and 700 people there from all different denominations, as well as the chief secretary for the Muslim religion for Central and Western Africa, plus 6 or 7 of, I don't know what they call them, imams or your moms or somebody's mom. I don't know what they're called, but they were there. And the president of the country hosted a meal for myself and for Dr. DeKoven and for Patrick Mutwari, who is there. And then we were given the privilege of attending a closed session of Parliament to talk about what they'd accomplished over the last 19 years. And we met with the leading dignitaries. And I certainly don't say that in any boastful way, because, but I know that God's no respecter of persons. And you here this evening may think, well, God could never use me. Well, you're right. But He might do it anyway, if your heart is postured to be open for whatever He has for you. I was raised in the Southern Baptist Convention and missed out on a lot. Growing up as a Southern Baptist, I didn't get the dance. Matter of fact, I told my mother one time, who's 92 and blind, and I call her every day when I'm home. I said, Mom, I learned why Baptists are so opposed to premarital sex. They're afraid that it'll lead to dancing. You'll get it before the night's over. But I would read that Matthew 28:19 and 20, go into all the world and preach the gospel. And my wife of over 48 years has gone places with me. Winnie and I had the privilege of living for a time in the Northern Territory of Australia, and I managed a 2,000 square mile ranch, and I've had the opportunity to go to Jamaica and Guam and Peru and Argentina, and of course Mexico, and do mission work. And you know, in Australia we did mission work, and because I knew how to break horses and work cattle and things like that, that was no big deal. But I thought that was trying to fulfill the Great Commission. And depending on whatever translation you read, and that's one of the things that Anthony taught us on one of his trips there, that he just finds the translation that says what he wants it to say, and that's the one he preaches out of. And I haven't gone quite that far, but in my study of this Matthew 28:19 and 20, I focused on the word go and make disciples, but the word nations is used there, and you read different translations, but I ran across kind of an obscure translation of that scripture. And here's what it says. The commission was to go into all the systems of the world, all the systems of the world. And what we're wanting to do, and what you're partnering, and what you partnered with us to do, is to go in and address the systems of an entire nation. And I'm overwhelmed that they have so embraced simple little teachings on standards and false standards. You know, we all live by standards. And since you've had Bob Nichols in here, no doubt he's taught on things like that. But we have such a tendency to impose our standards on people that are neither right nor wrong, but they may be our standards. Because once we set a standard that's not necessarily God's standard, then we have a tendency to become critical of the people that don't measure up to our standard, and then those criticisms become judgments in our lives. And I want to tell you, I could take you with me to Rwanda, and I would ask you to point out a Hutu or a Tutsi, and you couldn't tell the difference. But one of the things that was used to determine during the genocide whether a person was a Hutu or a Tutsi was the width of their nose. And in my own mind, I wonder if like the one young lady that we interviewed that managed to escape into the bush after being macheted, and had scars on her head and on her back and her neck and her arms. When she came back home, her husband had been bludgeoned to death, and her brother had been beaten, and her little son had been hacked to death with a machete, and her little baby daughter had her head cut off. That lady sat there and told us about that. And she said, but I've forgiven them. You know, it's easy to talk about forgiveness. It's easy to talk about reconciliation. It's easy about picking up and going on in life, but I'll tell you, it's a heck of a lot different and harder when it affects me or you. I've got 19 grandchildren, and I'm not a Catholic or a Mormon. And every one of my grandchildren, we love them. They've given us no trouble. We only dread one time of the year, That's at Christmas. Well, my wife doesn't, but I know how much money we have, and she wants to give the grandkids always the best and the most and everything. But I don't know what my attitude would be if I got a call and was told that one of my little granddaughters had been kidnapped and raped. Now, I would like to think that I would have forgiveness in my heart. But I don't know until that moment comes. I asked one time about 500 pastors if someone put a gun to your head or held a knife to your throat, would you deny Christ? And they all raised their hand and said, we would not. I said, well, let me tell you what I would do. I don't know. And you know what, really, they didn't know. Because you do not know. But Rwanda is a country that is so emerging in forgiveness and reconciliation. They refuse, they will not let anybody to talk about tribalism, the Hutus and the Tutsis. They say we are Rwandan. We're Rwandan. We're not Hutus, we're not Tutsis. And there's a lot of bitterness in Rwanda toward certain countries. Belgium, France, Germany, the Vatican and Rome. A Hutu priest told all of his people to come into the parish, 2,500 of them. He locked the door. Called the Hutu terrorists. They started throwing grenades and started shooting through the windows with machine guns and killed 2,500 people. And he fled the country. Some of those countries are still harboring the perpetrators and will not extradite them. And I had a man ask me, no, it was the young lady that lost her family. I've forgiven them. Should I testify against them because they've been caught? And I said, absolutely. You know, we always have the privilege to forgive, but we don't always have the power to pardon. And the country, quite frankly, is being very gracious to the perpetrators of the genocide. If they admit to it and they go and ask for forgiveness and try to bring some type of restitution, they'll go ahead and serve their time in jail, but when they get out, they're free. The Rwandans are happy people. And it's almost incomprehensible and I will not go to the genocide memorial again because there's an anger wells up in me. Oh, by the way, in America, our country could have stepped in. And I am thankful that our then president, Bill Clinton, has apologized to the nation and given $10 million of his own money to help rebuild the country. But I'm overwhelmed, and I cannot, and I've mentioned this to Anthony, I cannot articulate it in such a way that it would grab a person's heart or cause them to want to necessarily do something. But I am overcome with amazement that I get to be a small part of changing an entire culture of people and only going after the issues that are in their hearts. And that's why, in even talking with President Kagame on my last visit, I told him all I can do is present what I have and try to instill in people the importance of honor and integrity and honesty and having righteous standards, being submitted to righteous authority, and these sort of things, because that has to come from the heart. Because, and I don't even know where I heard this, but you can teach what you know, but you reproduce what you are. And even though, and I don't know if we're going to take time to show it or not, but there's some graphic stuff in there, but it's real. And I think sometimes we have to be shaken into reality, because we live in such a confined life that we don't understand what's going on in the rest of the world. I used to go to a prayer meeting once a month up on a mesa overlooking our valley, and I finally just made judgments toward a couple people, because they were, oh, God, help us in such perilous times. And I look at this guy, he's living in a nice home and driving a new car and takes a vacation every year. And he wouldn't, anymore when we get ready to eat, I don't even bless the food, because our food's blessed in America. I mean, sometimes I don't wash my hands before I go eat. I don't think about going to the water spigot and getting water out of the tap. I don't think about going to my freezer and getting ice to put in a glass to pour my drink. And you do that in those other countries. We're blessed. And I want you to understand that and I can't even explain it to my own family members, some people in my church, that why would a conference cost that amount of money? Well, most ministers in that country, no matter the size of their church, and some of them are hundreds of people, but they're poor also, and everybody walks. That they're bivocational. And if they're not served a meal that day, they don't eat that day. If they don't work, there's no money. I mean, in my house, I have a refrigerator with a freezer. Out in my garage, I have a chest freezer, an upright freezer, and a refrigerator. And most of the people in that part of the world, and other parts as well, go every day to the market to buy their food. So we have an opportunity to impact the country. What we're doing right now, and I'm going to wrap this up real quickly, is we've been able to purchase a piece of property in Rwanda to build a church, school, and the government is very interested in not only the religious training but also the technical training. And I have an email here from Dr. Standakova, and he has Vision International University and seminaries in 150 countries around the world. And somehow or other he's come in contact with an individual that is involved in the business management and technology courses at the, what does it say here? New York University. And they are open to partnering with Vision International to give curriculum on the technical side of things, because that's what the country is wanting, is for people to be trained technically with biblical principles. And so we have that piece of property. Patrick was able to purchase another piece of property in Nagatari, which is the hometown of President Kagame, and come to find out that after he purchased the piece of property, they're building a 5-star hotel right next to that. the mayor of the city says, I have another piece of property right next to a Muslim mosque that I will give you if you will build a school right there. So there's tremendous possibility and tremendous opportunity. I want to kind of finish by just, again, thanking you. And I'm not here with my hand out saying, I want you to do more, because you've gone over and above what you've already done. And I'm so appreciative. And I know that sometimes saying thank you is very shallow and hollow, just like saying I'll pray for you sometimes. But you don't know the gratitude that I have in my heart for the people that have invested in what's going on in that country. Never intending again to go to that country again. And you know, I was even thinking when I was getting the shots for all these sicknesses that I could possibly contract while I was there, little did I realize that in going to that country that my heart got infected with the people of that country. And so all I can say is thank you, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you.